Welcome to chapter 12 of Pride and Prejudice. This is going to be probably a rather short video, as you can see, but I'll just have to do another chapter right back to back of Pride and Prejudice instead of jumping back to Wuthering Heights because they have rather long chapters in comparison. But let's get started. The chapter opens with Jane and Lizzie writing to their mother asking for the carriage to return home, but their mother responds back saying, I cannot possibly give you the carriage till Tuesday, which would then mark a week that Jane would be spending at Netherfield, and even writes in the postscript that if they're asked to stay on, she can spare them. But Jane and Lizzie don't want that for a couple different reasons. For Lizzie, I think the bigger motivator is that this has been a miserable experience for her, that she's starting to already feel like the Bingley sisters don't want her around. She doesn't care for them either and doesn't care for Darcy. And that's the only company she has. And Jane's sleeping during probably most of the day, recovering from her sickness. So what can she do? She's technically a guest in this house. It's not like she can help in ways that she normally does in her own house. And it's not like she can go walk into town like she would with her sisters because she's staying with Jane. So she's kind of in a weird situation where she's idle and with people she doesn't want to be around. So she is itching to leave. Whereas Jane's main motivator, but still part of Lizzie's motivation, is teetering on the precipice of being rude guests, of overstaying your welcome. And you don't want that either. Like, you don't want to stay past what is necessary. Like, already their stay is not one that most of the house guests want, and them staying even longer is only going to make them seem more ugly in their eyes, and it's going to ruin the relationship. Whereas Mrs. Bennet is thinking that it's helping the relationship. She's thinking this is perfect. It's just Jane because she's probably ignoring Lizzie. Lizzie's just there as a chaperone. As the only female who's not related to Mr. Bingley for 24 hours, this is perfect. They can, have a relationship. This could really help Jane's, you know, cause to get married to him, not realizing that, like, they're not really hanging out much because Jane's like most of the day is not really doing much. But there's not much competition. But really, like, again, like, there's a point of then it's gonna harm you of overstaying or over, pushing too hard. So, like, we're having this kind of subtle conversation about courting and dating and things like that, of like this weird balance that exists, these unwritten rules of like trying to show that you're interested but going not making it too apparent, not go pushing too hard to then be kind of to the person. And you simultaneously don't really want your mother pushing in because it's not very attractive to men often, but the mothers feel like they're helping, and you have this awkward dichotomy going on that would have been very present during their time and still is present today. You still see it today, but definitely then. And Mrs. Bennet thinks she's helping, but her manner of doing so is far from subtle, and it often is a deterrent unless the man is very obtuse, like, say, Mr. Collins. We also get a glimpse at this awkward dynamics between the Bingleys and the Bennet sisters, because when they ask for the carriage, Miss Bingley communicates with them, especially Jane, like deterring till at least the next day. Can we have you for another day? But then immediately regrets pushing Jane to stay another day because she likes Jane's company. And like she said in her letter, she cannot be alone with her sister. And it's not like you're hanging out with the men very much. Like, there is an old show that was on, I want to say BBC, or it was a British show, and it was kind of a reality show, but showing what the everyday life was like during Regency time. So it was modern people living in a Regency home, but they had to abide by Regency rules and standards and social etiquette. So, like, they were each given different rankings, which then decided what rooms and what clothes they would have, and also showed that, like, most of the day the men and women were separated, and like the men can go outside and go shooting and do all these fun activities, and the women were stuck inside, and they're like, this actually is miserable. So, like, they're not really interacting much, and to then be stuck with only the woman during the majority of the day, that's just her sister. She doesn't want to be with her sister, as she said. So she would prefer to have Jane being here. However, she then realizes that, wait, this sucks because Lizzie's still here and Lizzie would have to stay. And I'm highly jealous of her, as says that Miss Bingley was then sorry that she had proposed the delay, for her jealousy and dislike of one sister much exceeded her affection for the other. So she realizes it's not worth it if Jade is, if Lizzie's going to be around too, because obviously Lizzie's more interesting to Mr. Darcy at this moment. He won't pay attention to me despite all I've been doing. So like it's 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 funny because it's a very similar thing that Mrs. Bennet wants Jane to be doing with Mr. Bingley is what Miss Bingley is trying to do with Mr. Darcy, which is catch their attention and be courted and things like that. But awkwardly, Miss Bingley now has competition with Lizzie being there, whereas Jane doesn't have competition, but Jane's been sick and can't really interact as much as Miss Bingley can, but Miss Bingley is Mr. Darcy's making it very apparent that he is not at all attracted. However, things could change, as we see in the case of Mansfield Park with Fanny and her cousin Edmund. But it won't, obviously. But she's trying and realizes that this isn't going to work if Lizzie's around, because if Lizzie isn't around, I'm the only one here. And maybe if I'm the only one here, he'll be like, oh, this is a good pick. I'll settle for that. So there's a lot going on here too. And it's funny getting a peek in Miss Bingley's head, Caroline Bingley's head, because Caroline Bingley is a pick me, but she's such an interesting character that she cannot be around her sister, will love Jane to be there, but really hates Lizzie because of the competition. And her hatred for Lizzie is going to then influence her relationship with Jane. And I think it's going to influence why she pushes her brother to leave and ignore Jane, because I think she realizes that if Jane and her brother marries, one, it's not very advantageous. She just wanted Jane to be kind of her little buddy, not to be married to her brother. But also, that would mean that Lizzie would be in close proximity to Mr. Darcy, and that wouldn't be good either. So it's slightly ironic that Mrs. Bennet wants Jane to stay in hopes that it would further the relationship between Jane and Mr. Bingley. But Jane standing firm where she believes she has a right to leave actually is going to work in her favor, in my opinion, because, distance makes the heart fonder. That, like, her not being in close proximity would then mean that Mr. Bingley would have to work to come see her again. And it would prove whether or not he generally isn't interested in, Jane and wants to further this relationship. And I think then would have to work for it. And that would make it more interesting for him instead of too easy, which is, I think, Caroline's downfall, is that she's making it too easy, whereas Lizzie's making Darcy work for it. So Jane leaving, she's doing it in her head because it's the right thing to do by social etiquette. But ironically, she's not trying to do it to manipulate him, but it's gonna, I think, help her case, whereas Mrs. Bennet's trying to manipulate them, and it would actually harm the relationship. There's one more detail that I forgot to bring up earlier, which is that it was very common during this period of time that people would stay at other people's houses for weeks, if not months, which would have been my hell personally. But it's because of, like, moving, it took time and stuff. And it's just like, it made sense during that era to stay for an extended period of time because travel was harder and things like that. But there's a difference if you look at, say, how Mr. Collins is treated, even though he is overstaying his welcome and is not welcome in the first place. But the way that they interact with him is very different than how they're interacting with the Bennet sisters, which is that Jane was invited with the pretense of being there for just an afternoon or the evening, but because of her sickness, they have to extend hospitality to her out of social etiquette and morality. And then Lizzie shows up, and then social etiquette dictates that they invite her too. And this, then you see a kind of tone difference in the way that they're treating the two Miss Bennets and their place in the house versus, say, Mr. Darcy, who technically is a guest too. He's just a guest welcome for an extended period of time. There's more here that I personally do not know, and I would love to do a little bit more research on the social etiquette and house guests and things like that. But there's a lot that you can unpack with just house guests and the rules and etiquettes and symbols Previously, I mentioned how it's almost ironic that Jane and Lizzie wanting to leave and Jane staying steadfast in social etiquette and civility of not overstaying their welcome. Her steadfast wanting to leave is actually going to help her case with Mr. Bingley because she hasn't really seen him much anyway. She's been in the sick room. They're not really interacting too much. And as we see, her leaving them makes him have to work more for it. And it's more of a challenge, more of a hunt. And I think he then wants it more. Whereas previously it was a little too easy. She's in his home, but like she's not around. Whereas like the irony of the situation is that Mrs. Bennet wants to keep them there in hopes that it would pursue, but it hasn't been working and it would actually threaten to go wrong by being uncivil of overstaying your welcome. But the other end of the irony, there's another element to it, is that by them staying as long as they have actually furthered Mr. Darcy and Lizzie's relationship, despite what Lizzie and Mrs. Bennet probably would want in this moment in time. Because Mr. Darcy says that to Mr. Darcy, it was a welcome intelligence. Elizabeth had been at Netherfield long enough. She attracted him more than he liked, and Miss Bingley was uncivil to her, more teasing than usual to himself. It's showing that I think he was intrigued and maybe found her attractive enough previously, but having been around her alone for the most part and able to have one-on-one conversations in the evenings and during the day with her more than he would have in any other case, doing what I think Mrs. Bennet was hoping would have happened with Jane and Mr. Bingley, he became more interested in her as a person and more infatuated because they got to have more of a conversation. And that's more of Mr. Darcy's style. He wants more one on one, not just dancing. But he's realizing that maybe if she goes home, it'll be easier for me to then recontextualize her back in like why we wouldn't work and I can nip this infatuation in the bud. Like it'll be fine. Obviously, it's not going to be fine. He can't get past her. And I think his feelings get stronger as it goes on. But you can tell that he has grown fonder with more interaction with her, but also her being there has brought out a different side of Caroline Bingley and has made her look more ugly in his eyes. But the thing that I want to point out is that he said that Miss Bingley was uncivil to her. Her is italicized. And I think there's a importance to that, which is that like I think it's showing that he believes that Caroline's being unfair, like she's just a guest and is just there to help her sister. And I think he doesn't like that Caroline being uncivil to her is making him sympathetic and kind of aligning himself more to her, and he doesn't want that. But also, like, it's like to her, like it's not her fault. Like he thinks it's like it's my fault. I'm the one that keeps talking to her and doing things. Like obviously, she doesn't want to interact with me as much. But simultaneously, he then says that like Caroline's been more teasing to him than usual, and I think it annoys him because her style of teasing, I think, is not right. She teases him about things that she thinks he would believe in and would represent, and he doesn't. Whereas, like, I don't know, like, it's funny because Lizzie teases him about things that aren't true so much. It's close, but not quite true, but he finds it as a challenge to disprove her. And maybe it's because it's about him as a person and not him as what he represents as like a landed gentry is the difference in the teasing. I'm not quite sure, but still interesting to pick at. And also I just like the irony of the whole thing of like Mrs. Bennet pursuing purposely and not very subtly one course of action is that course of action is not going to work in the way that she thinks is going to work and actually it's helping another relationship. The thing about Jane Austen's writing is that the particular words and language used tells you a little bit more than what you might glean off the surface. So you kind of have to think about some things a little bit more. For example, Mr. Darcy then thinking he wisely resolved to be particularly careful that no sign of admiration should now escape him, nothing that could elevate her with the hope of influencing his felicity. It's very easy to be like, oh, he just doesn't want to, you know, show that he admires her and cause him to feel anything, but it's the wording of him saying that careful that no sign of admiration should now escape him, nothing that could elevate her with the hope of influencing his felicity. It's the with hope of influencing his felicity is him wrongfully thinking that she would be like her mother, who is very apparent, not very subtle. So he's thinking that she would pursue him in a way that Caroline Bingley is very blatantly pursuing him to for what he represents for his money. That is what Mrs. Bennet is doing. That is what Caroline is doing. He's assuming that Lizzie would do the same, and he doesn't want to give her an inch to think that she could because he knows he's at risk that he would fall for it with her. So it's him wrongly assuming. That's the part that I love, is that him wrongly assuming that she would be like that. But like, he's gotten to know her a little bit better, but he just doesn't know her quite that much yet. And based off the circumstances, he's not wrong in making this assumption, but it's still a wrong assumption. And by the way, that line is going to come back in the botched proposal that he's going to do a little bit later, like him pretty much saying that, like, this is what you and your mother pretty much wants, right? Like, someone to landed gentry and money, and I'm the idiot that fell in love with you and willing to do it. Like, you win, is pretty much what his botched proposal is kind of saying. That's what he's saying here too. He's thinking that's what's going to happen. And Lizzie has to point out to him in that botched proposal that that is not at all what she wants, never wanted. And he misinterpreted her and was so thinking about himself and wrongly assumed that she was like her mother and like Caroline. This is what I love most, and what I think is missing in a lot of books is the layers beneath what is being said. So for instance, Mr. Darcy studied to his purpose. He scarcely spoke 10 words to her through the whole Saturday, and though he were at one time left by themselves for half an hour, he adhered most most conscientiously to his book and would not even look at her. So what is being unsaid beneath that is that he has to be very conscious of not saying more than 10 words and focusing on his book. Because of that, you can see beneath the words what's being unsaid is that he really wanted to keep talking to her, that he really had to focus on not interacting with her, and it was made even harder when they were alone for half an hour. And it's what's being unsaid makes it even cuter. It makes me smile and kick my feet and squeal at the romance of it. And that's what I think we're missing in a lot of books, is that, like, they're trying to be very blatant with things and make it very obvious that, like, you still get the giggles a little bit, but it's not the same as, like, being able to infer, being able to think, oh my god, I see something that you guys don't see, like, and lying to yourself, the element of lying to yourself. That's what I love most in, like, the romantic subplots and plots of stories. It's like feeling like I'm smarter than the characters, if that makes sense. But here I love how Jane Austen wrote that paragraph. I like that the chapter ends with Jane and Lizzie returning home, much to their mother's annoyance, and she makes it very apparent. And while their father curbs his pleasure, he is very much pleased, saying that the evening conversations when they were all assembled had lost much of its animation and almost all its sense by the absence of Jane and Elizabeth. In the addition of, like, him bringing up the evening conversations, we're getting the paragraph about Mary talking about the usual deep in the study of error base in human nature, and Kitty and Lydia talking about the recent news and gossip of the regimen. What I've gleaned from it is it's supposed to show the difference in the dynamics of Netherfield versus Longbourn. Netherfield, in the evenings, they would play gambling kind of card games, or they would read to themselves, or, had some conversations, but mostly kind of everything felt performative. They played card games because that's what was fashionable in fashionable society, London society. And that's what you do with gambling. You waste your money away. Or maybe you would read, maybe by yourself, or write a letter by yourself. There are very few conversations being had, or you play billiards and stuff like that. But in Longbourn, they're not playing games per se. They're having conversations. They're talking and interacting with each other. And while it's not always the kind of conversations you might want, it's telling you more about the people. It's telling you more about the individuals. Like, yeah, Kitty and Lydia conversation might seem silly to their father and to some of the others, and Mary's might seem way too lofty and a tryhard, but it's telling us about them as a person, that they feel comfortable to be their truest selves there, whether for good or bad, as we see in Lydia's case. But by having these conversations, you're more likely to influence and grow them, and you're getting a deeper sense of who they are. Whereas at Netherfield, it was a performance, it's a mask, it's a facade.